And I will pass the agenda over to the mic over to David. Go ahead. You've got one right there.
Yeah. Marilyn, how about if we introduce the discussion of themes with these handouts? And right now we talk about the other business that's listed on the agenda. We had been waiting to nail down the date and location before moving ahead with the program. I don't think we have that luxury, so we're going to attack both on two tracks starting now. It basically boils down to the week of June 8th or another date in July. Marilyn, would you like to talk about that a little bit? Here.
No, here, this one.
I can have
I
that.
got it.
Oh, that'd be great. And if you move it over here, is that okay? We'll just pass it back and forth.
Yeah, you leave it on this side.
Thanks, David. So we had in our last meeting also explored the idea of July, I think it was 7th or 8th through 14, avoiding the 4th of July holiday period is a little challenging. I think the 4th is Saturday. A lot of people will be taking holiday on Friday, Saturday, so that kind of rules out the first week. I have spoken to Manu Badra from Kathy Novelli's office, the Undersecretary, about Kathy's interest in providing a perhaps closing keynote. And I've also spoken to the Brazilian minister, Fonseca, to see if he would travel to Washington, D.C. at that time and provide the invitation. We've had a customary attendee at some of the IGF-USAs from the host of the IGF. Typically, it's been somebody from the mission here, but it's been a kind of a nice, we've had Lithuania come and give an invitation, with Azerbaijan give an invitation, and there is interest on the part of Brazil in coming and giving an invitation to the attendees at IGF-USA to attend the IGF. So that's a little bit of a formality. Kathy would be able, during that week period, about 6 or 7 days in July, Manu thinks he can make her available. I just want to comment that Ambassador Sepúlveda is not available on the dates in June. I think that's been conveyed already. I conveyed that information. So those dates in June do not mean that we do not have Ambassador Sepúlveda available. We also don't have Kathy available. I understand we have Strickland available, but our custom has been to make sure that we have high-level speakers from both of the key supporting entities. I would just say also that moving to July offers one other opportunity for us that I want us to think about. The two co-facilitators for the 6-month WSIS review at the UNGA will be appointed in June. They will not be, if we wanted to invite one of the co-facilitators to come and speak, it's going to be more likely to get them in July than it is the day after they're appointed. And everything that I know about the process in New York and my contacts with DESA and others lead me to indicate that early June, we're not, we may not even know, the co-facilitators literally are not going to be announced until June. So I want to just part those things for us to think about.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that to all of our attention. However, it would still be optimal if the State Department would be able to facilitate June. Until we're 100% sure that that's not going to happen, I suggest we aim with a tentative date of June 8th. We start preparing everything, and then it can always be pushed back.
I'm sorry, David. I don't. It's Marilyn speaking. We talked about dates at the last meeting. I don't understand.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. It's extremely difficult to hear you. If we could speak into the mic a little bit more. My apologies for interrupting.
Sorry. Is that better?
A little bit.
My God.
Thank you.
I have it in my mouth. This is getting to be gross.
I don't want you to be gross, Marilyn,
Well, I mean, can we hear from somebody else to see if anybody else is having the same problem?
Well, I found it hard to hear him.
Okay, all right. I'll make the adjustment. Keep going, please.
Sorry. Look, David, I'm sorry. there's been a little bit of exchange between you and me and Shane and others about these dates. June doesn't work for the State Department. They have said they can't do it then. So what's the insistence on doing it in June? Could we understand if there's a problem? Because if there's a different request for a special event, the IGF-USA has to, if they're going to be affiliated with the IGF, they have to follow the guidance of the IGF to hear all views. They can't just be a platform for a single speaker. So if we need to do a special event, we've done special events in the past. We've done special events where we have a speaker and then respondents. We've done those at Carnegie. We've done them elsewhere, and that's been how we've accommodated special requests. So if we have a special request, could we clarify what that is?
We don't have special requests. What I'm saying here is that it's important to NTIA, as Chris Hemmerlein expressed at our first meeting, to have a platform before ICANN. Yes.
This is Beth. I'm from NTIA. If I could hop into the queue.
Yeah, hi.
Steve.
Who's speaking?
I'm sorry, from the call, and who wanted to speak?
Beth.
Bacon from NTIA.
Hi, great.
Hi, I just wanted to reiterate and thank you again for noting. So unfortunately, Chris Hemmerlein is on travel, and he's almost exactly 12 hours away from us right now. So I am hopping in on his behalf. And I just wanted to reiterate his point previously. It is extremely important, and I think that NTIA thinks it would be very valuable, as in past, to have the IGF take place before the June ICANN meeting in BA. I understand that there are some opportunities as well with the July meeting, but I think that we view this taking place in June as more valuable, maybe the July opportunities. And also, I feel certain that, unfortunately, it sounds like State Department is not available. Larry Strickling is available. And I feel certain that we could find someone from the FCC or White House to participate to provide that additional voice, if that would help allay concerns there. Thanks.
Beth, it's Marilyn. So I'm going to say two things. We have never organized the IGF-USA around the availability of an ICANN meeting. Never have we done that. So if there's some misunderstanding about that, let me correct that misunderstanding. We have always looked at the best dates that meet the broadest needs of all of the stakeholders. And I respect the fact that Larry wants a special event, and we can take that into account. But I think we need to plan a program that is balanced and that fulfills the objectives of being a regional IGF.
Absolutely.
I don't think that anybody's questioning that. I think it's a matter of, if there's an event coming up that's related to internet governance, and we might be able to say things about that would be important in a timely way, why not do it? I don't see a conflict here or any concern. I think June is fine, and I don't see what the issue is.
Hi, it's Steve Del Bianco. I would suggest that we look at 3 or 4 variables for when to hold it. And one variable is, do we have time enough to plan? Another variable is the Buenos Aires meeting. Another variable is the United Nations work. Another variable is the availability of key speakers. And given State Department's significant role at IGF, I feel like state's availability is perhaps more important even than NTIA. They're both hugely important, but I wouldn't suggest that State Department can be skipped because IGF is so important. Okay, and then finally, I wanted to note that if there was a special need, because I'd heard this discussed at the previous meetings, if there's a need for a special announcement, revelation, or speech that our NTIA could give in the walk-up to Buenos Aires, then I would bend over backwards to find a way to host an event that would be perfect for that. But I don't think that event has to be the IGF-USA. In other words, we can host an event. ISOC DC has been amazing at that, and we could. It could be an evening event, it could be middle of the day, and we could do something over the course of an hour and a half. Right. So I'm just suggesting there's some flexibility there. We could accommodate the event. Wait a minute. We could accommodate an event and have the IGF event that we want to have, and at the same time.
Yes.
Everybody here makes valid points. I'm not saying we're going to exclude state or we're going to exclude NTIA. We obviously have to work this out and find a middle ground where everybody's happy. Until we do that, it's always best to plan for the earliest possible occasion. I'm suggesting we plan for June 8th. It can always be changed. That way, we can always do it later. If we start planning the programs and the panels so that we have the infrastructure prepared, should we need to do something in June, that's better than not being prepared should June come up. I'm not 100% sure that we won't be able to accommodate state and NTIA in June. We obviously need them both on board. That's what we need to work out. I move that we table this discussion now. We will not do anything that alienates any of our key government constituencies. We move that, we table that, we move on to deciding the program. We will hash this out and everybody will be involved in that discussion.
Okay, we've got somebody online. Going to Jonathan Zuck.
Hi, thanks. It's Jonathan Zook for the recording. I guess my only point that I would raise about this is that what we might want to do is make sure and come up with the must-haves for the IGF so that then becomes the criteria to assess the date. Because otherwise we might make sacrifices to do it earlier that we can't undo because we postpone it later on. Like there ought to be a minimally viable product or something like that for the IGF that we establish independent of the date and then make the decision about the date.
That's a great idea. We'll make a matrix or a checklist. I'll take the first run at that. I will pass it around to everybody. We will all be in accordance, but we need to get them both on board, basically. We're not going to, they're both key stakeholders. We need to work this out. All I'm saying is that we start preparing the content in the meantime.
Can I ask a question, please? Could we just, again, review the dates that are the options? We know June 8th, June 15th, and what about in July? What are the potential dates for July?
June 15th apparently is not an option.
Okay.
June 8th, June 10th, and what are the July dates that are options?
So we propose doing that between the 7th and 14th.
Yeah, good.
Sorry, what did she say?
Hold on.
7th and 14th is what she said.
Of July or June?
July. July.
July was 8th and 10th of June.
This is Judith.
Why is
June 10th is not a good date because our fellows in Canada have planned an event then, and so we cannot, and Paul is going to be there, and so that will not be a good time.
Mm-hmm.
We're working on cloning Paul.
Okay, and what about the 15th?
What about the 15th, Marilyn?
I never heard June 15th mentioned.
July 15th.
Is that, oh, July.
No, June 15th. That's the date that
No,
GW
June
gave.
15th does not work. Let's
Why?
move forward because of ICANN things. The ICANN people, we would not have access to ICANN.
That's not what Joe wrote.
Susan, sorry, it's Marilyn. It's Susan asking, right? So ICANN 53 meets the 21st to the 25th of June in Buenos Aires. For people who are on the IANA CWG, and the Accountability CCWG, they're going to have to travel to Buenos Aires probably like on the 16th. And there's also the possibility of a pre-event that could be organized by the stakeholders that would take place on the 19th or 20th. So if you think about there's also a huge amount of materials being developed and delivered to ICANN for non-transition issues. A meeting that is the 15th would literally mean on the 16th people having to pack up and leave. It's a very burdensome, and that's, there's a lot of people engaged from that will be duplicating here. Not just the staff. I know it may work for the staff, but I think we got to think about the community.
I could just add that on the 15th, the Computer Freedom and Privacy Conference is scheduled.
Oh. Yeah, the 15th doesn't work, in short. The short answer, so we could spend more time talking about this now and at the cost of not moving forward with developing a program. The tentative dates that we're going to choose from are June 8th. Okay. June 8th, June 10th, or between July 7th and 14th.
It's not good anymore.
What?
Paul's not going to be here June 10th.
Right.
You should leave it on the table.
We're going to leave it on the table. Thank you. But we can work around that. If all of the players in the world can come together on the June 10th, we need to work that out and leave that.
I'll work that out.
Yeah. And once again, the criterion is that all the players and key stakeholders can participate. That is all of our goal, and we will work towards that. Next, feeder satellite event. I just want to establish a New York team and then check with them later in the week. David Solomnoff, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Can you take the lead on the New York team and maybe get Jolly and get 2 other people to help organize the New York team?
Absolutely. And I'm going to be meeting with Marissa Malotek, who is the events director, I believe her title is, at Civic Hall this afternoon, and discuss with her our feeder event being located there.
And can we schedule a call for sometime around Wednesday or Thursday?
Yes.
Can you
let's
remind me?
Let's shoot for Thursday. I think that's going to be better for me.
Good.
David, I just have a quick question for David.
Please.
David, it's Marilyn. So you referenced a location of, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. It's Civic Hall. It's a very cool new space. It's at, I think, 21st and 5th Avenue, and it's a new center to bring together technologists and civic activists. And it was started by several people, including Mika Sifri and Andrew Roche. We've done other events there already, or co-sponsored events like Freedom to Connect. And it's a co-working space, conference rooms, and an event space that's pretty big and nice that will take about 150 people. And we've done, video stuff there too.
So thank you. The main question I was going to get to, you already answered, which is as many as 150 people. So with feeder events, what that normally means is for plenaries, it works well. When we talk about workshops, we may want to come back to you and think about, are there particular workshops that you would want to connect into? But I'd leave that to you and David. I just wanted to understand how many people might be able to come into the main room. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So just to pick that up, have been talking to David Yorst about a Bitcoin blockchain cryptocurrency track.
David, can we hold that off till we talk about?
Sure. Sorry. Okay. Later. Okay.
It's important that you bring that up very forcefully. Very good. Okay. David Sneed emailed an update. He's working on a fall feeder event from Texas, and he's working with the Austin Tech Council. I think we all agree that would be awesome. I failed in my rush to complete this while working on other things. I failed to include the educational programs and student programs we mentioned. Dima, are you there? Okay. Jana, are you there? I will follow up with Dima this week, and we will have that outline by our next meeting.
And David, it's Marilyn. I don't mean to be skipping ahead, but I think Jana had volunteered to work with Joe on developing a questionnaire.
Yes. Very good. Okay, now for the e-ticket ride. Now we move from admin to content. I'd like to propose that we flush out what the panels will be in a similar way that we did last year, which had the advantages of taking suggestions from the multi-stakeholder community writ large and organizing those as best as possible into panels. To do this, the first thing we're going to do is have an open discussion now, write everything down. I've also posted a suggestion form online. Paul, could you click on that? And I will email that out to everybody. In the next 4 or 5 days, we'll take suggestions online. We will collate everything, and between Joe Catapano and Jana, we will produce a survey, which will be circulated. We will have the results of the survey, and we'll have an open meeting, and we will go from the survey results to panel team formations. That work for everybody? That makes sense? Am I missing anything?
Missing one thing. I brought it up at the last meeting, but I think we have some new folks here today. I just want to restate, it's Marilyn speaking, the invitation from the MAG at the IGF to introduce the themes and the sub-themes of the IGF and to ask whether the IGFs, the initiatives, will be advancing workshops on any of the sub-themes, and secondly, whether we're going to contribute to the discussion on the development of policy menus for connecting the next billion. So as a MAG member, Aubrey Doria and myself and Cheryl, I think you're on the phone still? Okay. And Fiona Alexander are among the MAG members from the different groups from the, so most of you have a copy of the sub-themes, the main theme and the sub-theme in front of you. And I think we should look critically at this. I just want to say one other thing that sometimes gets lost, and that is when our treatment of critical internet resources at the IGF-USA has always encompassed the IANA issues or the ICANN issues. So we have typically in the past had a focus on, I think Milton will remember some of this, but we've had a focus on a workshop that focuses on IANA or on ICANN, but it's typically under the heading of critical internet resources. It's not called ICANN or IANA. But if we could talk for a few minutes.
Actually, we want to open up the discussion of themes and content we want to frame that around the global themes. And the idea.
I just wanted to be sure, David, that people are able to, they have this information in front of them.
Yeah,
So,
good.
yeah.
That was a naive question.
That was meant to be the starting point.
Is this a list of global IGF main themes? Okay.
But just for 1 second before we do that, there's the online form. This will be emailed around. I can attach the IGF. Marilyn, if you would like, I could put the global themes on top of that page. Yeah, and an introductory paragraph.
Can I make a suggestion, please?
Susan, please do.
David, it would really be helpful if these documents could be submitted in advance of the meeting, and so people could be prepared for the meeting, like the schedule, the agenda, things like that.
It's in the last meeting.
I think she's talking about the agenda for this meeting. Duly noted. Duly noted. I agree with you. Duly noted. But we're going to move ahead. We were going to frame our content suggestion discussion around the global themes and sub-themes. There is the online form that will be sent out to everybody who couldn't be here. We will include the global sub-themes in that. I'll edit that. Marilyn, I'll discuss that with you and edit that with you.
David, we might, just as a background information.
Yeah. What organization? Yeah.
And it's like
name, rank, serial number, your idea.
And then we put background information, and then we say your additional. Yeah.
And we'll put a paragraph on top that says, "Here's the global themes and sub themes. We would like you to take these into consideration." Okay. All right, let the games begin.
So, but David, maybe
why don't you frame this discussion by talking about how we can best incorporate the global themes and sub-themes?
Okay, so I think it'd be great if we could hear from folks in the room and on the phone a little bit about, so the main theme for the IGF this year is evolution of internet governance, empowering sustainable development. And just a quick comment, some of you know this because you've heard this in the previous meetings, but because of focus this year on all the work that is going on in New York related to sustainable development and the replacement of the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, with Sustainable Development Goals, the MAG at the IGF agreed to incorporate recognizing sustainable development in the theme. And under that main theme, then there are 8 sub-themes: cybersecurity and trust, and we have married those 2 topics. Internet economy, which is a recognition of the interest of developing countries in the idea that there is an emerging internet economy. It has certain aspects to it, and maybe Garland might say a few words later about the implications of understanding the internet economy. There's a lot of work going on in this area, new publications coming out of the World Bank, coming out of OECD, coming out of some of the other UN entities that are focused on how jobs can be created in developing countries and how policy relates to that. The third sub-theme is inclusiveness and diversity. And so you should think about gender empowerment as fitting under that as well. And the 4th theme is openness. The 5th is enhancing multi-stakeholder cooperation. The 6th is internet and human rights. So the IGF MAG talked about the idea that this is not a replacement to the Human Rights Council. This is a focus on how human rights and the internet have a nexus and how that relates to internet governance. The 7th is critical internet resources, and the 8th is emerging issues. There are also best practice forums. I'm not going to go into those right now. I just wanted to focus us, if we could, for a few minutes on one other point, and that is this intercessional work that is going on that is called Policy Menus for Connecting the Next Billion. And that, if Cheryl is still on the phone, she might be able to comment on that, but that is a pretty big priority to the IGF, and it's about the policy menus, that is a range of activities that can connect the next 2 to 3 billion users. I did meet with the FCC last week about this particular topic and what's going on in the US about connectivity issues. But I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about what is of interest and what we've heard. David and I have already heard from one particular trade association that has an interest in the internet economy as a topic. But if we could talk a little bit more, maybe more granularly, about what strikes all of you about the topics that are here and what's of particular interest.
Just before we go, one quick administrative thing. Everybody in the room has these, and people online will have the online form that we've sent the URL. We will be sending out the URL. If everybody in the room, as we're talking now, writes down their ideas and suggestions here, I'll collect them, and we'll tabulate these into the big master source. And Paul will also keep track on there. So let's open up the discussion to subjects we should cover.
So shouldn't people online put this in the chat so that we'll tabulate?
No, people online are gonna just, people online will fill out either the online form or just speak, and we can.
You can't fill it in. I mean, it's
right. The online form is on the web page. It'll be emailed out to everybody after this meeting.
Oh, okay.
David, it's Marilyn. I actually can't respond to this right now. Is it okay if I could respond on the online?
Yeah, sure. No, this is just for note taking in the discussion now.
Oh, okay.
This is just to help us keep track of it. This is not, Steve.
Thanks. Steve Del Bianco with NetChoice. I wanted to ask this group a level of interest in a topic that would have to fit under emerging issues. It's something that my group deals with almost all of the time right now in multiple states, and it's the question of what happens to your online presence when you die. What happens to your Facebook account, your Yahoo email account, your Gmail account, your pictures, your Dropbox account? And as a billion people begin to age, some of them actually die. When they die, Facebook doesn't know you're dead, and trust and estate attorneys come in to try to help the family administer your estate, and that includes your digital estate. And decisions are being made to post things as if you were still alive. Families are wanting to get access to private communications that many national and state laws don't allow you to get access to. So we have a patchwork of legal landscapes around the world, not just in this country, but a patchwork around the world as to what sort of consent was necessary to turn over your private photos and communications to your wife and kids when you die. I mean, everybody understands the need to unwind an estate and take care of any debts and assets, but that's not what this is about. It's about private communications and private photos. So I have to say that in the last 15 years of doing what I do, this has consumed us for the last year here in the United States. And when I bring the topic up, people often have a reaction like, wow, that is an interesting topic. It's robust enough that when one explains it, it touches everyone personally. It raises the question about, you get an interesting debate that says that I want to have access to all of my dad's stuff when he's dead. And then on the same token, they'd say, but when I die, I don't want my kids to have access to everything that's mine, because I may want to have permission. So it doesn't fit neatly into one of the sub-themes except emerging issues, because sooner or later we're all going to die. And if it has a level of interest in this room, I'd be willing to write it up and do the work to present it as something we could cover at IGF-USA.
Ties into privacy and the right to be forgotten. Maybe if we bundle those.
But I didn't see those pop up on here.
Yeah, but I mean, these are a starting point.
But aren't these from the IGF?
Yeah.
Right. These are a starting point. We can cover those.
They're from the actual IGF.
Yeah, the global.
We always like to map into the global.
Right. We can bundle those and tie them in, and we will. Pardon me. My impression was that we need to address these as well as other issues that we find.
Do you like the idea, though?
I like it bundled into the right to be forgotten and privacy.
And Steve, there's just a recent European court ruling, right? So if it were right to be forgotten, privacy, and the implications of, I'm almost thinking of this as it's like you have to have now a will to dispose of your physical assets and a will to dispose of your digital assets, right?
Yeah, less than half of us on this planet have a will.
So I think it's very interesting. And
my wife.
I think it's fascinating. I think it's, it's a very important topic.
Yeah.
It's an emerging issue.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too.
And it fits the weather today.
This is Garland. I was just wondering real quick though, is this just pertains to private sector held? Obviously you're not going to get out. No, well, you're not going to get this right to be forgotten forget it. But it's, I mean, you can believe it if you buy a bridge and they'll ship it over from England. But there's no, or you moved France. But because the storage of information the government has, you're not going to get into that stuff. They're not going to give it up to you. And so anyway, I mean, yes, it's fine to have Facebook and Cooperate and everybody else that's involved, search engines, whatever, but you're not going to get the stuff they've got backed up over in Utah that's gone, So anyway, so. I'd like to weigh in.
You can have fun, though.
This is Milton. So I would caution you against bundling too many privacy-related issues into one thing. For example, right to be forgotten and what Steve is talking about, I think, are completely different. I would have classified what Steve is talking about more as an identity, a digital identity issue, than a privacy issue.
I agree with Milton.
And some of the privacy issues might fall under cybersecurity and trust. If you're talking about surveillance and the kinds of things maybe that you're talking about, government record keeping, whereas I don't think they would sit well with this interesting sort of
death. By the way, there's a professor, I think she was in Scotland, who specialized in that area. I could look up her name, or Konstantinos knows this professor, and maybe he could tell you about it.
I think that's better. I think if you focus on the digital identity aspects.
Yeah. Okay.
It's also, it's an issue that is an emerging issue.
And remember, we're just sussing out subjects to put on the survey, but I think we've agreed that this goes on that list.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that, which is that technically it would be possible to use cryptocurrency technology and smart contracts to automatically transfer, for example, access to an email or a social media account from one person to another, and plug that into a will. So you could have a digital will that would automatically do those things. That could tie in with the cryptocurrency track as well.
I'm going to leave my Bitcoin in New York. Okay.
Yeah, this is Steve Del Bianco. That I can understand the digital identity factors into the digital legacy question, and yet it becomes at its core giving people the notion that they need to act in advance to control what happens to their digital identity and digital legacy when they die. They have to act in advance by identifying in a will, going into Facebook and appointing their legacy contact, go into Gmail, identify your alternate contact. And you have to understand that some laws, already one law passed in the United States, overrides the selection you made on Facebook, David. They override it and ignore it in the state of Delaware as a result of a new law. So the conflict of laws with your personal preferences comes into play. I would support Milton's point that it would not be helpful to conflate this topic with right to be forgotten or with government surveillance. They're distinct enough that there's no way I want to start planning them as if it's all one uber topic. It would be better to say digital identity and legacy and flesh that out. If it turns out it's not a rich and robust enough topic, then consider combining it with something at the end. But I wouldn't start the planning with that. And I'm willing to do the outline for digital identity and legacy, and I'll work that up, but I don't want to jam government surveillance and right to be forgotten into it. I also want to endorse right to be forgotten. It is a fascinating topic with a lot of depth to it. If you remember from the Istanbul IGF last year, there was an entire panel on it. CDT and I spoke extensively at it. This is a topic that has a lot of gold left to mine in it, and it deserves perhaps to have its own session at IGF-USA.
Agreed.
Deserve to be forgotten.
So we'll move forward and list those topics as just described. Judith.
Can I list one?
Yes.
Can I suggest one?
You may.
Yesterday, the UN Human Rights Council created a new 3-year mandate to examine the relationship between the right to privacy and surveillance and how it intersects with surveillance. And so it's quite clear that there aren't shared norms for privacy, let alone the rule of law. And so this relates to the topics of human rights and internet governance in general. And so I've been part of this study group, working group for the Freedom Online Coalition to advise them on the rule of law online. And it just seems to me we should have a discussion of, are there shared norms so that we can find common rule of law online?
Shared norms for human rights, is that?
No, it's shared, it's broader than that, because it's not just human rights law, it's how it relates to other forms of law, such as surveillance, activities of government, free flow of information.
Get a subject for me in 5 or 6 words.
Yeah. Human rights.
So are there norms underpinning global governance of the internet?
It's this. It's human rights, surveillance, privacy, and international norms. We can hammer it out later and fine tune it. That's it for now.
And it fits under internet and human rights.
This definitely parallels or fits into cyber security and trust and human rights and the internet and human rights. So let's say human rights and surveillance.
No, David, I'm sorry, I'm not doing a good enough job. It's much broader than that. It's about the role of norms and governance.
Are you
and you know how international law and national law and national law and international law sometimes intersect in bad ways for the internet. And so you see it playing out on privacy and security. You see it playing out on free flow of information and privacy. So trade agreements and privacy. The problem is that some governments more value their need to monitor their citizens' safety on the internet versus other governments that make more of a priority of the norm of privacy.
Is this something like national sovereignty versus international internet norms? Milton,
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I
think it's more norms and governments, but we can.
Yeah, national sovereignty versus international internet norms. We'll make that sound better.
Okay.
Judith.
This is Judith Hellstein. So I heard some fascinating panels when I was in South by Southwest, and one of them I think really fits in here, and is on the Internet of Things, but is really who, as so many new devices come out, of refrigerators, of everything having its own Wi-Fi, relating to digital identity, who do we give permission to access our data? Like if a company is selling a wearable, do they have permission from us to read their data? Oh, like we're happy, we're sad, we're in a bad mood, we're not. How do we give permission and how of that for that type of thing? And I think the discussion around that and on some other sites there's a lot of different people in IEEE who've been working on that issue. Yeah, I will send you a short description.
For now, can we, hold on.
Yeah.
Can we concisely phrase that as something like data privacy and the Internet of Things? Or data permission?
Data is more, I get you would say more permission, because
Paul and I had a great conversation with Danny Weitzner about that.
Right, and there's a bunch of people in IEEE who are based in either DC or in the area who have really been working on this and working with a nonprofit group that can work to give permissions.
We have some great sound bites on this.
IoT and permissions.
Yeah, IoT and data permissions.
And Marilyn?
Hi, this is Justin Queso from IEEE. And I just wanted to follow up on that point. We're actually, we're looking to do a submission for a workshop in that realm for November. I'm not sure where we'd be for June or July, but I can let you all know at some point.
Thank you, David. It's Marilyn speaking. So last night, thanks to Judith's promotion of awareness, and thank you, Judith, for doing that, and Jolie's webcasting, I was able to watch the event that took place in New York. And I just wanted to revisit an idea that might be of interest. I'm just saying might be of interest. A couple of years ago, we did an event called The Plethora of Principles, where we sort of looked for commonalities across, at the time, we looked at 8 sets of principles. What I heard last night was very interesting. It's like there's 17 to 18 different sets of principles. There's great commonality across these principles. And some of the speakers, for those of you who watched last night, you heard George Sadowski, Stefan Verhos, others. It was really interesting to think about how we are practicing turning principles through action into reality, and looking at how that then is affecting norms, or even then becoming instantiated in legal practices or legal changes that are taking. I don't know if there'd be interest in it, but I do think that we keep hearing the idea that we need a new governance structure or we need a new set of principles, yet we have 17 to 18 sets of principles. The OECD event that took place here in Washington a couple of weeks ago also had some interesting discussions about the application of customs, taxation, other kinds of harder laws to the internet. And when I look at the internet economy, I'm sorry, Garland has stepped out, but Garland has been doing some work on the areas around internet economy and what the barriers are to advance the internet economy. And I mention it because I heard David made a reference to Bitcoin, and to me, Bitcoin, while it might be money may be of interest, I think the real issue is more what's changing in the infrastructure that supports the internet economy, which may be more than just Bitcoin. It may be other mechanisms like money as well. So I don't know, I'm just sort of brainstorming here, but we know that SIIA is very interested. They've contacted David and me. They weren't able to be on the call today to indicate an interest in internet economy. But if there are people who are interested in internet economy, Garland's just come back in, that might be a subgroup to kind of try to flesh out what a workshop would be that would look at internet economy, both what barriers are, but also what opportunities are, what the different views are.
I'm going to agree with what you said and expand just slightly. Yeah, in terms of Bitcoin, I'm much more interested in a big picture about digital currencies, using cryptocurrencies, and all their capabilities, including more, their use in smart contracts and other kinds of things that go beyond normal financial transactions or currency.
This is
If Mike Nelson were here, we could call it Money 2020.
Yeah, this is Garland McCoy. I'm a big fan of blockchain and all the various new treatments, and so it's whether it's voting, whether it's contracts, whether it's money, wills. It's in my opinion absolutely a sterling software, and quite frankly, Bitcoin is kind of a nice little thing you can look at and all that, but the real beauty of this thing is the software that sustains it, the platform, and its uses are just begun to be mined. The workshop, though, coming back to the economy stuff, is we've had usually, as people know, I try to focus on access, but that things seem to have shifted a little bit with this upcoming IGF and the tone a little bit away from some of the areas I've traditionally treated. But we have enough experimentation, I think, now in particularly developing countries, and I'd argue in developed countries as well, with taxes, fees, tariffs, the whole, the various ways that revenue is brought in to build out the country's broadband, national broadband plan, and and universal service fund, and to sustain it. And so now looking at various studies economic studies that have been done, OECD, private groups, Deluge, others, to look at how countries that have applied a very heavy mix of to bring about a lot of revenue in have fared versus those that have had a lighter touch with their mix, versus those like Colombia, for example, of late, that have rolled back their revenue stream, their taxes and fees and licensing and tariffs, etc. So, how does this play out? Do we have some evidence on how this is then affecting the build out of the infrastructure, access issues, and how does it trickle down into things like tourism? When Hilton Hotel wants to look at a country to build, and they're looking at a number of countries, what makes one particular developing country, let's say, raise to the top of their list? What are they looking at? And so that might be a helpful way of defining this. So I just throw that out there. But again, I'm a big supporter of blockchain. That's it.
So why don't we put that down, blockchain and cryptocurrency? Is that what that was?
I think it was internet economy, and then
and then split in.
then
Yeah, but internet
subtopics.
economy
And then
through the
sub-
lens of blockchain and cryptocurrency.
But we kind of lost track of Marilyn's first proposal, which was on the redundancy and overlap of principles. And I think that that's an important thing to bring up, because there isn't one overarching set of rules, and yet there's all this redundancy. And I think that has implications for access to information, for use of the internet, etc. Something worth exploring.
Hello, this is Peter Dengate Thrush joining the call. My apologies for lateness.
Thanks for joining. Hey, I just want to note that the discussion is great. I think that trying to capture the discussion is not so productive. So, you know, if I think maybe everybody should just use the online forum to submit their ideas, because there's too much discussion here to try to, you know, this is discussion, not.
Okay, so Paul, can you post the URL?
Yeah.
For people, and people in the room can just write down stuff?
I would just like to pick up on what Aaron was just talking about, and that is, you know, kind of supporting this idea of what Marilyn was talking about in terms of what we took up at IGF-USA in terms of looking at a number of these models. Obviously, it sounds like it's almost doubled in terms of what we're talking about in terms of various different programs out there. So the idea, I thought it was challenging when we were there. I thought it was very fruitful to kind of come up with the commonality, a discussion of what's different, why it's different. And I think the idea of being able to look at that now and have a more robust discussion, I think that'd be a wonderful feat and event. Can those online please please mute so we don't get the feedback?
Clint. So somebody is typing. Be sure to mute your microphone.
Yeah, I'm going to mute it. I'm sorry.
So I would just like to, I'm not sure I could follow up on this. It depends on what date you select for your IGF Washington. But when we talk about cybersecurity, I think there's an important distinction to be made between the sort of technical and operational aspects of cybersecurity and the cybercrime aspects and the what I'd call the geopolitical aspects, which I think are becoming increasingly interesting. I think there's an important nexus between the openness and the globalization of the standards of the internet and this now push for cybersecurity, which is increasingly nationally focused. And that we're, you know, in part, this is the sort of the, not just the data localization issue, but it's the data localization writ large, the equipment manufacturers, you know, can we trust Huawei? Can Huawei trust Cisco? To what extent do China and the US push for different standards in Wi-Fi or something like that? The more these technological and operational issues get wrapped around the axle of national security, I think the more difficult we have creating a globalized internet.
So it's Marilyn. I'd like to follow up on Milton's comment. I'd like to see a workshop that addresses the cybersecurity and trust, and maybe even the third dimension of openness, and looks at it. I think, so ISOC just did a survey. I think they expected 250 respondents. They got over 800. It's a global survey. The first priority identified was the issue of cybersecurity. And when I meet around the world with the ICT sector, with trade associations, and with governments, the risk and threats and concerns about attacks, identity theft, but also attacks on citizens, attacks on banks, there's a huge issue of concern on the part of governments, and the question about what do we do about it, and on the other side of it, the question on the part of the intermediaries of expectations being pushed toward them and their concerns about what they do that is legally protected, and yet their need to also cooperate with law enforcement. I think it would be timely if we could do something. And this would be potentially a workshop that maybe Liesl France and Chris Painter's team at State, as well as others from the academic world and the technical world and the business world, might be able to put together a very interesting workshop. In the past, our cybersecurity workshops have had well over 100 attendees. But Milton,
This is Jonathan. I'd love to get in the queue on that as well, if I could.
Yeah, and this is Judith Helsing. In addition to the Maryland's also thing we may want to bring in, or maybe have a separate session on cyber crime and bring in Tony T. Luxons and his.
We don't do cybercrime at IGF, Judith.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry.
I mean, Tony has come and spoken before, but as a specific topic, I'm saying no, but we've always tried to keep cybercrime in a kind of internet, that's very much a government to government. I'm not, and Tony has often spoken, but I leave it up to those who plan it. I know Jonathan wanted to speak, but specifically as a topic, it kind of takes us into a space where the intermediaries can't speak.
Can we go to Jonathan?
And maybe after Malcolm?
Whoever was up.
Jonathan.
Hi, thanks. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
This is related, but it occurs to me that one of the core elements of sustainable development is actually entrepreneurship and access to global markets outside of national boundaries. And I think right now the greatest threat to what might be called a global single digital market, is related to cybersecurity and national sovereignty interests and the potential fragmentation of cloud computing and other economies of scale that have enabled entrepreneurship and access to markets that have come through app marketplaces and things like that that are under real threat, I think, as a result of what's going on right now in the cybersecurity area. Encryption is one of the things that's being discussed. So I think tying this back to small startups around the world and throughout the developing world and what they need to succeed and how those things are being threatened in that environment could be very interesting in the theme of sustainable development.
Yep. Just really quickly, decentralization is very important to sustainability, given that the kind of heavy environmental footprint that large data centers have, so that if we could encourage, greater decentralization through protocols and that type of thing, it would have a positive effect in terms of the long-term environmental impact of the internet.
And I didn't know who was speaking. David?
Oh, sorry, David Solomon.
Sure. Just a question for Jonathan. It's Marilyn, Jonathan. So would you put that under the sub-theme of internet economy, or maybe internet economy and then identify other, would you, because it's kind of sounded to me like it did fit under internet economy.
Yeah, I mean, internet economy is such a catch-all. I actually think that it is the most direct connection between the cybersecurity and trust theme and sustainable development.
Okay.
I mean, because it's not something that feels like a natural fit, but in the current times, there's a direct impact that's going on where countries are looking to relocalize, et cetera, as a result of Snowden revelations and things like that, that are going to have a dramatic impact on small businesses in Africa and their ability to sell abroad and to maintain cloud-based storage. I mean, the issue of centralization or decentralization is another discussion, but the decentralization done through nationalized purposes with sort of forced localization, I think, is ultimately anti-competitive to small businesses and entrepreneurship around the world. So it's a little bit of it takes a little bit of explanation, but I think it's a potentially very important connection between cybersecurity and sustainable development.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let me emphasize what Jonathan said, that the sort of national security dimension being superimposed on the internet is, in fact, has massive implications for free trade in information services and free trade in equipment. It's a direct link, and I think one of the interesting things that it may not be comfortable for us in this group to face is that the United States is, typically we're in a position where we're telling other countries open your markets and don't do bad things that fragment the internet, but in fact the US, because it is such a powerful player in the cyber war, cyber security context, is equally responsible, as the Snowden revelations make clear. And if you spend a lot of time talking to our national security issue, you find out that many of our national security people have the same attitude towards the sovereign internet as we accuse Russia and China of having. It's really a completely different mentality sometimes. So you really have to look at ourselves as well as at other countries.
Definitely.
Sure.
I support it.
Yeah.
Jonathan, this is Dan O'Neill with GIIC. I just want to, again, second that whole idea. And I think the idea of centralization versus decentralization and what we have talked about in some of the global IGF, in terms of the sovereignty issues, I think we're definitely seeing that spill over well beyond just, government issues into impact on private business and the ability in these developing countries to do just that kind of work that you're talking about. So I would agree. I see it very much as a trust issue. So it does, clearly impact internet economy, but I think it really gets to the issue of trust and how to maintain that level of trust needed to succeed.
We're having a panel on that on the 31st.
Good.
Who's we?
ISOC DC.
I'll send it to you.
And it's okay, but you might just announce it for everybody.
Yeah, ISOC DC is having a panel that'll be live streamed on March 31st, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time at the WeWork Wonder Bread Factory on digital trust and the future of the global economy. While we're so. If anyone's interested.
So
I saw that.
we probably
I'm going to try to make it.
pretty much exhausted this, but I want to take us back I want to take us back to
policy menus for connecting the next billion, and whether IGF-USA does want to contribute intersessionally to those discussions. And if so, we would need to identify who wanted to engage in that. This is a focus by the IGF on intersessional work that is really about how to connect the next, we did have a debate about whether it's the next 2 to 3 billion or the next billion. There's some interesting reports. The GSMA report that was just published at their Mobile World Conference, and also a report published by Alliance for Affordable Internet that is very, I think, helpful and interesting about what the real facts are about who's connected and who's just able to send a text message. Because being connected and being able to create information, to access and use information and knowledge, very, very different than being able to send text messages or get headline news. Just one quick minute. I'd be happy. I'm hoping that there are people who are interested in this. I certainly am, and I'd be happy if others are interested. We could put together a small IGF-USA interest group, and then, think about contributing intersessionally. You're contributing in your individual capacity. So it's just an effort to broaden engagement in that. Steve had a comment, and then Garland.
Steve Del Bianco. Marilyn, could you explain the context to me, because I'm confused? So IGF put this forth as an intersessional topic of interest, and yet it didn't make it to their 2015 main themes at all. Is it because it's only intersessional and therefore it's not for discussion next autumn?
No, sorry, I really should have explained this. So in the Commission on Science and Technology Working Group on Improvements to the IGF, we were, after 2 years of work, with governments and representatives from 5+5+5, technical community, business, and civil society. We made a set of recommendations that went into a report to CSTD, went to ECOSOC, went to the UNGA, and were approved. And among those improvements was identifying work that could be presented at a national and regional level to invite engagement. So this is really an effort to, it's a particular interest, as you can imagine, Steve, to the developing countries, very broadly to the G77 in particular. And the policy menus will be presented possibly in so the sub-themes are workshop themes. We should expect the Connecting the Next Billion to be more of a main theme readout. So a main session readout.
How do you read that main theme, empowering sustainable development? Is sustainable mean what we, in the environmental context,
yes,
or does it mean something more about developing how does that factor in?
So we drew that theme came from the influence. If you turn that chart over that I gave you, so on one side is the Internet governance landscape, which is just and the other side is the timeline. And right, if you look at all those teal blue targets, this is the development of the Sustainable Development Agenda. The United Nations is replacing the Millennium Development Goals with Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17. Those goals are climate change, they are poverty, they are hunger, they are, and I can send them around, but the issue of sustainability is an agenda that means it is not just sporadic, but you're really, so if you think about moving people out of poverty, Steve, over the past 10 years, something like 20 to 30 countries have now developed what we would think as a emerging middle class. It may not be middle class in the definition of the UK and France and Germany and the US and Canada, but it's middle class compared to, and those people are now able to send their children to school, they're creating jobs. So sustainability is a term that means it's not totally dependent on aid, it is self-sustaining. But we brought the sustainable development into the IGF because the developing country representatives from civil society, from business, and from the technical community and the governments that are on the MAG are really making it clear that if we want the IGF to be meaningful to the G77, and of course we're influenced, I think, by the fact we are in Brazil.
Okay.
So I said I was interested in.
I am.
Okay.
So obviously, very.
Anyone else?
However I can help. Please loop me in. No,
real quick, this is Garland McCoy again, though. This issue pops up all the time. And Steve, you said you were just in Istanbul, and as I'm sure you'll attest, and they're also on different trips and stuff. The back of the envelope test that I've been using for a decade now still holds true. If you're walking down the street in Istanbul, and there are a lot of every other block, there are 2 or 3 travel agencies, storefront travel agencies. Well, they're just lying about their broadband access. That's the first to go. I mean, there's an absolutely inconsequential. I mean, if you go in a little candy store, a little shop, and they've got the girly magazines in the back, well, then they don't have broadband access. I mean, who the hell is going to buy a girly magazine when you can stream, porn on the internet, for heaven's sakes? I mean, it's just, in other words, you can test right away whether or not the government's, got just cooking the books, or whether you've got real meaningful, broadband access. And how many storefront travel agencies have we got in Washington, D.C.?
No, they sell the Washington Post though, and that's available online.
So, has been enough time, do you think?
Yeah. It's about this thing. Are there any other, all well taken about intercessional work and about global themes? Any other suggestions for things we might cover that haven't been brought up yet?
Guys, it's Marilyn. I'm just going to take advantage of this opportunity to tell you that a reminder that the IGF workshop proposal date closes on the 30th. If you think an extension is needed, I'm just saying to you as a MAG member, you should write to the Secretariat and advise them you think an extension is needed. I'm not advising you to do that, but I am hearing from, I don't want to miss the reminder that there's a deadline for
30th or 31st?
30th. But if you feel that a deadline is needed, you should send that. You should send that email.
What can you ask?
An extension.
What's reasonable?
7 to 10.
10 days.
10 days?
7 to 10 days. You can't.
I'm sorry, the deadline is for intercessional.
No, the deadline is for workshops, and I know some people are submitting workshops, and since we're on them, other people will be to the global IGF. I didn't want to miss that because otherwise people will be.
I think there's a good reason for that. It's much more complicated. I've been doing these right all along every year, some people know, and it's much more arduous this time around, in my opinion, than it's been in previous years. And I think obviously the
Linda Becker, Stephen, Kathleen, Donna, Reed, Morgan, Raymond, Robin, Don, Cleary, Dave.
Continue though.
well, anyway, it's obvious. What I understand is that the folks that have, obviously different sources of are filing, and you're seeing a lot coming in from the usual stakeholders, obviously the companies and big established not-for-profit NGOs. But since one of the keys here is we want a lot of participation from the smaller developing countries and smaller NGOs and more that don't have necessarily a lot of back office support that little time might be justified.
So you want us to take a lot of these ideas we discussed, punch them into the online.
Yeah. We got the first half of them. You can write them out on your paper and hand them to me, and I'll tally them.
Put them in. I wanted to articulate it carefully.
Everybody feel free to fill out that form and give it to me too, or do it online.
So I know it's Marilyn. I noticed we don't have Jana or Dima with us, but Jana and Dima were both talking about our ability to organize almost a separate track for youth. So maybe we could take that up in our next meeting.
Yeah, I'll be in touch with Dima this week. Are there any other issues did we discuss net neutrality at all?
No, please. Oh, for God's sake.
Oh, for God's sake.
No. Let's go.
Sort of have
Let's
sort of have to.
I'm sorry.
We should flex this out.
No, I'm sorry. Let's put that on the table and talk about it. Are we really going to do one more net neutrality forum at the IGF-USA?
No, it's done. It's cooked.
Well, we're not doing net neutrality at the IGF, I notice.
You can do something about the international implications of what happened in the U.S., whether other countries would view it as a model, whether it would undermine the distinction between telecommunications and information services, which we beat the ITU over the head with.
Right.
So, look, put it on. People need to put it on the list and identify it. But I will just make a plea. Let's please not be just one more shadow of Brookings and Cato and Heritage and Hill hearings. So if we do it, can we make it, can we do what Milton is proposing, which is,
Yeah, I'd like to just point out that a substantial part of our audience, we hope to be from outside of the DC bubble. We hope. So we should take those things,
They really love it.
translate them, and make it relevant to the global IGF.
This is Steve Del Bianco. One way to frame it is to suggest what are the rationales for more regulation? What are the rationale for more regulation? Right to be forgotten is an example of a dubious rationale for more regulation. What happens when you die without a will is a rationale for more dubious regulation. the U.S. decision on net neutrality by the FCC is another rationale that can be used to justify regulation by treating online communication like the teleco regulations. So under that general theme, it's safer to discuss it there, because then we can focus on why we think what our government did is going to open the door for more regulation, and then we'll have a debate about whether that's good or bad.
That seems like a particular perspective that could be included.
Oh, it'll allow both perspectives, those who love net neutrality and those who hate it, but we're forcing everyone to talk about all that matters to this audience is rationale, the implications of the decision in the broader theme of a trend. As the internet grows and grows, it becomes a more and more important part of more people's lives. The tendency to regulate it increases. So what are the drivers for that regulation? We know privacy is a driver for regulation. Judith brought that up earlier. I talked about some others, but this becomes a driver for regulation because of wanting to revert to old sort of definitions. A driver to regulation by re-regulating the internet as if it were the same as our old telecom.
Oh, is Judith, and aligned with that, we might also talk about the decision on it to try to create more access opportunities for communities, and by the work on municipal broadband on that issue. On
Municipal broadband seems to.
Well, what they.
I mean, you're going to have to make sure
what,
people are complaining that they're not hearing.
What I was thinking on that is can we learn anything on the FCC's decision on how to encourage more public-private partnerships to work together to bring broadband to communities, because that is something that when he took on traditional regulations, that's an additional regulation that they're looking to do some work on helping communities and helping civil society get access.
May I?
You need the microphone.
I can enunciate.
No, they're saying no.
Okay.
Municipal broadband, I think, is its own animal and worthy of our attention.
Okay, so I'm going to steal a phrase from Del Bianco called the stress test.
Have you ever seen that?
This is not a briefing about this. The IGF-USA is not a briefing, okay? It's a debate about the internet governance implications. So whatever issues you propose, you need to be able to tie those to what are the internet governance implications. And whatever issue is proposed.
Seems like a lot.
Whatever issue is proposed. Otherwise, all you're doing is, and I don't want us to put us in the position of competing with the excellent briefings that ISOC DC is organizing on a range of topics. This needs to be, it needs to be, and you need to think about who the audience is. So the other thing that we might think about is when you propose a workshop, David, we might think about saying, please identify the audience for this.
Sure.
That way, that kind of helps us with building on our attendance as well.
Sure. Sure. And certainly everything needs to.
Turn the mic.
Yeah.
Certainly everything we do needs to have an internet governance tie-in, but I don't really think anything we've brought up here doesn't. Yeah, we need to flesh that out, certainly. One more elephant in the kitchen that we've kind of talked about in the context of critical or of internet resources. Mm-hmm. The other big elephant in the American internet governance kitchen is the IANA issue. We did ICANN account. Hold on, yes, please.
Can I just jump back? The last quick comment about the quote net neutrality issue, which is that it would be helpful to frame that a little bit broader in a bigger or positive way as a question of whether it's better to regulate, to ration a scarce resource, or create more abundance and bring in more, different kinds of competitive service providers. That's a policy question.
So, yeah, but can you, Steve?
David, can you write that in and submit that?
And Steve, could we talk a little bit about, if we were to do a workshop as opposed to a speech by Larry, we were to do a workshop, since you're so heavily involved, could you talk about what might be covered?
We were to do a workshop, this is Steve Del Bianco, on the IANA transition. A certain part of it is identifying for the audience, how did we get here and where are we in the process? And there's one of the implications of an early June versus a July. A lot changes, but it will be easy to update people on the two tracks, right? The IANA transition and the enhanced accountability and why everything ties together. There'd be some speculation about the notion of a deadline or a target goal. By the time we get to late June, the Commerce Department will probably have already extended for some period of time the IANA contract, because it's extremely unlikely we'll finish it in time for an October 1st transition. And while that provides tiny bit of breathing room, we want the urgency to still be really significant, because we are killing ourselves, those of us working on this team. I mean, it's 30 hours a week, just that, forget your day job. So David, so Marilyn, let me suggest that gets the topic teed up, and it would be efficient to do that very quickly in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 minutes. And then the remainder, since it's a workshop, is to discuss areas where there's likely to be clashes and controversy. Among whom? Well, the governments in the GAC, Congress, the administration, civil society, contracted parties, business groups. So we talk about all the different angles that have concern about it. And somewhere in all that, since it's an IGF lead-up event, we need to emphasize the fact that governments speak with multiple voices, right? They have a rep who shows up on the GAC at ICANN, but they also have representation at the ITU in the United Nations, who has their own sort of view on things. We have to talk about the overlap of this. What is the overlap of critical internet resources, which is one of your 8 subthemes? So we'd have to say that if this continues to proceed, sometime in the next several months, we will have transitioned the management of critical internet resources from a bilateral agreement, a single government, to a new multi-stakeholder community. So there's an optimistic, it needs to be optimistic, but realistic about when, and realistic about the controversies that still lie ahead. In other words, we don't want to create, we want to create optimism without unrealistic expectations. That's NTIA.
So the
So
maybe
send the FCC.
maybe we should just invite a description of yeah. Would you, Steve? I think we have to in some way recognize it's at least a current event.
Just a little one.
This is Garland McCoy again. One thing I would like to sort of weave in, and maybe it might be worth a whole different workshop, but maybe under emerging themes, everything. But it's interesting to look back, and I keep thinking about one example in Great Britain where they have their everybody pays in, and you have your BBC that's publicly supported by virtue of this fee or tax. But of course, you've got immediately you had pirate radio setting up, then you had B Sky B coming in. In other words, it is absolutely amazing how often you see pirated, over the top, encrypted, and in other words, the technology and the market will inevitably, case after case after case, finds a way around in through government's attempts to regulate markets. So it'd be interesting to see that graphs or some study or measurement, and I'm sure they're out there, of when governments come in and you get a real regime change in terms of a heavy regulatory approach on this particular marketplace, how quickly the technology and other elements react in terms of creating workarounds, whether legal or illegal, but again, or even just setting up competing marketplaces. So anyway, just throw that in.
Yeah, just, so you're looking to identify the tipping points there in terms of
Yeah,
that? I guess.
tipping points. I mean, there's already workarounds for if ICANN goes the wrong way. It's not a difficult thing to create. It is not a difficult thing to create a competitive.
It's already been done.
Yeah, exactly. So, if ICANN goes the wrong way for whatever reason, if the White House treats the ICANN process the way it treated the FCC on net neutrality, then all of a sudden, I'm just throwing this out. I'm sure I'm wrong, but if as it was with Wheeler, surprise, then what's the workaround?
So, everybody, thank you for your time. I hate to cut this off now, but I have to cut this off now. We have the room till noon. They have our generous hosts have other people coming into the room. Let's give Patrick Smith and the DCI group a big hand and thank you for helping us to make this happen. Thank you all for your participation and all the great ideas. Next steps coming soon.
What? We don't know that yet. It'll be announced very shortly. There'll be a lot of announcements by next Wednesday.
If we could try to stick with Friday,